Mouth on fire, burning mouth syndrome. The pain is real. When to suspect mast cell activation syndrome. Never bet against Occam, mast cell activation disease, and the modern epidemics of chronic illness and medical complexity. Written by Lawrence B. Afrin, MD, Kendra Nielsen Miles. Quote, "In my ongoing reading at that time, I newly learned of a disease called burning mouth syndrome, which certainly described her oral problem to a T, but didn't seem to be able to account for any of her other problems." Oral pharyngeal findings in mast cell activation syndrome. Mouthing off about mast cell disease, my first encounter with the oral findings in mast cell activation syndrome, of course, was the case of burning mouth syndrome, BMS, in Marlene, presented in Chapter 2. In the course of all the reading I had done over the 3.5 years it took from her first visit to me until I discovered Marlene's underlying mast cell activation syndrome, I had learned burning mouth syndrome was first described in the literature about half a century ago. Unsurprisingly, these patients quickly get routed to dentists and oral surgeons, and sometimes even oral pathologists, who I'm sure usually make good attempts to identify any of the known causes of burning mouth syndrome, a disease unknown to most doctors outside of those in the oral field, even though it's not a rare disease. Burning mouth syndrome. Burning mouth syndrome, BMS, is a syndrome in which there comes to be a burning sensation in the mouth and sometimes also other parts or all of the GI tract, most or all of the time. BMS has been in the medical literature since the 1950s. And although there are a few specific diseases that have been found to be at the root of it in a minority of cases, most cases are unknown cause. I have found and published that mast cell activation syndrome appears to be the root issue in at least some cases of BMS. Sjögren's syndrome. This is a relatively rare autoimmune disease usually managed by rheumatologists, in which the autoantibody that's erroneously generated by the immune system attacks, among other targets, key cells in the tear ducts and salivary glands that produce fluid and mucus. This leads to dry eyes and dry mouth and many other consequences as well. Since mast cell activation disease can lead to the development of potentially any autoimmune disease, and since mast cell activation disease can also cause burning mouth syndrome, which can lead to suspicion of Sjögren's syndrome, even though Sjögren's syndrome is only rarely found to be the cause of burning mouth syndrome. It's not surprising to see the possibility of Sjögren's disease being contemplated and investigated at some point along the course in some patients with mast cell activation disease. just when you think you've seen it all, or smoking is bad for you in ways you couldn't possibly have imagined. My appreciation for the heterogeneity of the disease has been fueled by the fact that while there certainly are some symptoms, such as fatigue, rash, aching, and itching, which are more common across the mast cell activation syndrome patient population, and many other symptoms which are less common, the full range of problems in each patient is unique to that patient. As I've noted many times in this book, thus far, each mast cell activation syndrome patient I've seen has taught me more about the wide range of symptoms and problems the disease can cause, from the polycythemia, burning mouse, and severe anemia, pure red cell aphasia in the first 3 patients I diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, to the many others I described in later chapters with assorted constitutional, gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, pulmonary, neurologic, genitourinary, hematologic, musculoskeletal, endocrinologic, and other troubles. As I've seen more mast cell activation syndrome patients, the range of issues I've seen which seem to be attributable to the disease has steadily expanded. The severity of mast cell activation syndrome often permanently steps up to a higher baseline level following severe stress. Mast cell activation patients often can identify a specific point in their lives, a month, a year, sometimes even a specific date, at which their general health took a distinct turn for the worse. Yeah, mine was in 2007. Since then, I have way more issues. And then the other one was in 2018, my worst year. Such points commonly follow, typically by days to weeks, but sometimes by several months or mere hours, acute events of either significant psychological or physical stress, death of a family member, or vehicular trauma, or of significant new antigenic exposure, travel, for example, or relocation. If they have recognized the temporal association between trigger and illness, such patients not uncommonly are quite convinced, even invested sometimes, for socioeconomic reasons, that the trigger was the cause of the illness. However, careful review of the patient's history virtually always reveals symptoms of MCAS to have been present long before the turning point, again often dating back at least to adolescence and perhaps even to childhood or infancy. Yeah, I am still convinced that all the developmental traumas and relationship trauma and trauma from a cult, plus the generational trauma through my dad, having been exposed to a totalitarian regime. All of that. That's quite a lot of different traumas. And as we know, trauma is stored in the body. And if you are familiar with the cell danger response by Dr. Robert Naviaux, when our nervous system feels a threat, goes into fight, flight, or freeze, it is operating in a different gear, so to speak. If this remains on stuck, well, the result of that is disease. Overall, she thought that avoidance of her triggers of heat, sun, stress, and exertion helped her control her symptoms more than her medications did. Such avoidance helped her feel somewhat better, in that she was not as completely exhausted, but still felt easily overtaxed and frequently experienced flushing. This could have been me. That's why I avoid triggers. I always feel better when it is cold, wintertime. That's when I feel alive and energetic and have very few symptoms. However, sunlight, summer heat, exercise, and most of all, stress, demand pressure, they all lead to symptoms, pain in the body, and the latest, burning mouth syndrome. The pain is real. One of the primary complaints of burning mouth syndrome is the feeling of having taken a gulp of scalding coffee or tea and scorching your mouth or tongue. That's exactly how it feels like. The definition of burning mouth syndrome is a burning sensation in the mouth for which there is no medical or dental cause. The burning sensation occurs daily and is present for 4 to 6 months. For me, it started since the mask mandate. This mandate caused so much stress. I couldn't believe it. For me, body autonomy is very, very important. And when suddenly a government tells you to put something on your body that harms you, harms your health, I am very, very triggered. I have PTSD and I am autistic and I have mast cell activation syndrome, so all of this combined, I cannot tolerate anything in my face. It will cause symptoms from the heat intolerance, tactile intolerance. So now I have a mask exempt, luckily, but the damage is done anyway. When I was forced to wear the mask during the service of customers, and that caused massive stress, heat stress in my face and overall stress from the tactile touch in my face. I fucking hate it when something touches my face. Yeah, and after that, suddenly I had those blisters on the tongue and cracks started to appear, burning sensation, but it was only for about 3 days per month. When there were the estrogen peaks, it was always then, and then it disappeared again. So I didn't really care that much. But now it is daily, regardless of estrogen peaks or not. Every bloody day, and I'm fed up with it. What is neuropathic pain? Burnng mouse syndrome is a central neuropathic pain condition. This means that the nerves connecting your tongue sensations to your brain are not functioning correctly. It also means that the problem is in your brain cells as well as the nerves to your mouth and tongue. There are no medical explanations for why this happens. Patients state that they feel the most pain by late afternoon or early evening. Yeah, same here. As your day progresses, the pain does too, unfortunately. Many patients also complain of sleep interference due to pain. Yeah, you wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Your mouth burning. Insomnia is a frequent problem for those suffering from Burnng mouse syndrome with geographic tongue. Geographic tongue is an inflammatory condition affecting the surface of your tongue. Why does geographic tongue happen? The surface of your tongue replaces itself every 7 to 10 days in the same way that your skin does. If anything goes wrong with this process, it can create bald patches where the papillae are not getting replaced quickly enough. This is my tongue. Sorry, it's a bit blurry, but you see those patches here. Cracks and other symptoms may appear, making your tongue look like a map. Vitamins and minerals provide what your body needs to repair and renew itself. Your body gives priority to more important organs, such as your brain, and your tongue basically gets the leftovers. If there is not enough to go around, you get geographic tongue. The state of your tongue indicates that other parts of your body that you cannot see are suffering too. What are the possible causes of geographic tongue? Food allergies are acting as irritants in your body, as are allergies to chemicals in household products. Yeah, or allergies to Mast, obviously. And I have mast cell activation syndrome, and histamine release is triggered all the time. I had it quite under control with taking diamine oxidase, but with additional stress in my life, this gets out of hand. Stress causes leaky gut. We know that. Therefore, absorption problems. You may be consuming enough vitamins and minerals, but are unable to absorb them properly. Yeah, because I'm really looking after myself in every possible way. And I have removed all the trigger foods. And I'm supplementing with additional vitamins and minerals, so that should be covered, really. but it seems there is an absorption problem. Your intestine health may not be as good as it could be. Yeah, again, if there is too much stress, you are not in the right digestive state. When you are in a fight, flight, or freeze state, then your body turns off digestion and energy goes into other places. When you are supposed to digest properly, you need to be in a very relaxed state. Peace of mind as well. That's psychology of eating. I don't have that right now because of this cursed situation and overall life situation. Anyway, so that is that. It is definitely mast cell related. Mast cells react to stress just the same as they do to weather changes or odors, many other things. Dr. Lawrence B. Afrin is an oncologist in Burnng, New York. He received his medical degree from Medical University of South Carolina, College of Medicine, and has been in practice for more than 20 years. He is one of the well-known experts on mast cell activation syndrome. Burning mouse syndrome and mast cell activation disorder, study by Dr. Lawrence Afrin. 3 cases of burning mouse syndrome are reported in which evidence of an underlying mast cell activation disorder was found.
So these are our learning objectives to understand basic emerging concepts regarding mast cell biology and disease. We physicians spend 7 to 10 years in training typically, and about 1 minute out of that 10 years is in mast cell biology and disease. But when you learn more about the biology, it's amazing how all the pieces start to fall into place on what's new, particularly with regard to mast cell activation syndrome. So I want to start actually not with 2 cases, which actually were my first and third cases in which I came to recognize an underlying mast cell activation syndrome that really struck me for how diametrically opposite they were in at least one key respect. And then I want to add on a third case that shows, that just illustrates just how differently this disease can present in different patients, and there are biological reasons for that. This was the second woman, the second patient in whom I came to recognize the presence of a mast cell activation syndrome. She presented around age 50, early 50s, with a new constant burning pain throughout her GI tract, particularly bad in the mouth. It was just excruciating watching her. I mean, she had this pain 11 out of 10 essentially every waking moment of every day. How in the world she did not commit suicide, I have no idea. Very extensive evaluations, all completely negative, until an enterprising endocrinologist checked, began wondering if it might be a neuroendocrine cancer, and checked a chromogranin A, which is a marker for some neuroendocrine cancers, and found it massively elevated. So she got sent to me. Again, I'm a hematologist oncologist, not an allergist immunologist. And what struck me when I saw her was, oh yes, she was sick, but somebody who has 100-fold elevated chromogranin A should look like they have advanced cancer. I mean, there's a certain look that people have when they have advanced cancer, and she didn't look anything like that. And so, yes, I went looking for all of the neuroendocrine cancers, couldn't find it. And then, and actually I had been working on her for about 4 years, trying to figure out what was going on in her. And as I was learning more and more about mast cell disease, 2 and 2 finally added to 4, I began realizing it might be possible that a mast cell activation disorder might be at the root of her issues, because turns out when you read enough biology of the mast cell, it turns out the mast cell is a potential source for chromogranin A. So I ran testing on her, we proved it, and with just some simple antihistamines and nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories, her pain reduced from 11 out of 10 to 1 out of 10 practically overnight. And I then saw a number of other burning mouth syndrome patients, and found that although they have different mast cell mediator expression patterns, they all have increased mast cells in the GI tract biopsies, and they're all responding to various mast cell targeted therapies. So obviously just these 3 cases alone, and I could spend weeks telling you about the 2,000 plus other cases I've seen, highly divergent presentations. I was 70 patients into accumulating my series of MCAS patients before finding the first one who I felt bore some reasonable degree of similarity to any of the others. So how is it possible that one disease can do this, and could other weird presentations be possible? But let's back up and look at what we've long known about diseases of the mast cell. There basically have been only 2 categories, if you will, of diseases of the mast cell. We've known about allergy for thousands and thousands of years, principally allergy, asthma, angioedema, urticaria, anaphylaxis. It is a highly prevalent disease worldwide. There appears to be increasing incidence and prevalence across all ages. It is a condition that appears to develop as some complex interaction between genes and environmental factors. And even though it makes sufferers' lives miserable, it tends to have relatively little impact on mortality. So this is, from my perspective, the new understanding of the total spectrum of mast cell disease. It's not a mountain, it's an iceberg in which the readily clinically apparent mast cell diseases are the tip of the iceberg, and sitting beneath this waterline of easy clinical recognizability is this vast bulk of the iceberg of different presentations of mast cell activation, which we have really not yet learned how to distinguish the different variants of this, certainly not at a molecular level. And so we sort of collectively, we pool all of these conditions together, and we collectively call it mast cell activation syndrome. In time, I have no doubt we'll learn to distinguish the different variants. I'm obligated, I feel, to put up a cartoon illustrating that the mast cell actually is a blood cell. It is derived from the hematopoietic stem cell, but it doesn't spend very long in the blood at all. I think it's also interesting to note that this cell, the mast cell, as best as the paleogeneticists have been able to figure out, actually was the original host defense cell as multicellular organisms began evolving many hundreds of millions of years ago. So before there were these other defense cells, which each accomplish certain roles in defense much better than the mast cell does, before all of that, there was the mast cell, or its precursor. And it's not surprising, therefore, that the mast cell had to pick up an awful lot of tricks to keep the multicellular organism alive and to persist to the next generation. And here we are more than 500 million years later, and the mast cell has remembered all of those tricks. And it comes back to haunt us.
All 3 patients oral pain responded well to mast cell activation syndrome-directed therapy. What causes burning mouth syndrome? We don't know if it's some toxic assault or if it's caused by a virus like Lyme disease. We really don't know what gets it going, but we do know that these hormones protect your nerves against toxic assault. 90% of people that have burning mouth syndrome are perimenopausal or menopausal women. During menopause, important hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are no longer produced by the ovaries. You will learn how these hormones affect the pain of burning mouth syndrome. Neuropathic pain is pain that is caused by disease or damage to the nervous system. So, therefore, nervous system regulation therapies might be helpful, and that's what I'm doing too. The author of the Mouth on Fire book writes about the hormonal approach. The use of hormones is one of the newest and innovative ways to treat not only burning mouth syndrome, but to treat pain that is called neuropathic pain. Because I have sun allergy and heat intolerance, I have been taking vitamin D3, K2 for quite some time. Vitamin D is a hormone that helps healing, reduces inflammation, protects against toxins. DHEA. DHEA promotes healthy nerves. It restores injured nerves. Moreover, DHEA levels fall when you get stressed. Oh, that's interesting. That's a big thing. Progesterone helps with mental focus and anxiety. It is pain relieving and increases endorphin release. Pregnenolone helps promote healthy nerves. It is a neurosteroid. The oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, it relieves pain associated with headaches, chronic back pain, irritable bowel syndrome, and other types of pain. I shared my post about burning mouth syndrome in different groups and was surprised that there are quite a few comments. Quote, I have burning mouth syndrome. I started back in September and I can't tell you how many avenues I've traveled to find answers. I've spent tons of money on different treatments and supplements. My tongue burns day in and day out. It goes away when I eat, same here, and is better in the first half of my menstrual cycle. I corrected all the nutrient deficiencies that I was told was causing this. I had my hormones tested, but I'm not perimenopause yet. My progesterone was rock bottom, so I started on a very low dose of bioidentical progesterone cream. It's helping, but the tongue still burns. Every medical professional I have seen have all told me it's a really hard syndrome to treat and it may linger forever, but I won't give up trying to find the root cause and hopefully healing. Yeah, I hope that we all find a solution. Quote, I was diagnosed with PMS last year. Now I have it as we speak. Just finished my period 2 days ago and have chronic headache and anxiety peaking. I have this since the mask. Super annoying and painful. I have it all the time. It's one of my worst symptoms. I get geographic tongue too. Didn't know it could be hormone related. Quote, I have had burning tongue and palate for about 6 years now. It is awful. Thank you for posting this and doing the groundwork. I really appreciate it. Quote, I have mast cell activation syndrome and Burning Man syndrome. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? Not just the mouse. Everywhere. It's my hands that swell, turn red and feel like they're on fire. Oh gosh, that must be so painful. Quote, I have it for 3 years, one of the most mind-boggling conditions. Very few doctors know about it and no one has found a cure for it. Quote, I had problems with it for years. It was horrendous and unrelenting. Also tasted like I was sucking on pennies all the time. It was awful for about 4 years. That's another quote from the Mouse on Fire book. Why is it so hard to get answers? Burning mouse syndrome has been puzzling the medical profession and their patients for over 2 centuries. And even today, many doctors still have no clue what it is, let alone how to treat it. One of the most challenging aspects of burning mouse syndrome is finding a doctor who understands or believes the pain. Most of my burning mouse patients come to me after spending months and sometimes years seeking answers. For many, it has been an exhausting and expensive journey without ever reaching their desired destination. One of my patients, Anna, is a breast cancer survivor who suffered from burning mouse syndrome. Anna told me that being diagnosed and treated for breast cancer was much easier than what she's had to endure while trying to find help for her burning mouth. But everything looks normal. Doctors usually underestimate the level of pain patients describe because they can't see any physical abnormalities and don't have an explanation for the pain. Doctors usually blame the patients for possible compulsive biting or chewing on their mouth or tongue. Some also assume that it is an allergic reaction to dental work. No, it isn't. I haven't been to the dentist for quite some time. Others sometimes tell their patients that the pain is simply in their head. Assholes. Like Kate, most of my patients have seen a dentist, ear, nose and throat specialist, oral surgeon, allergist, primary care doctor, neurologist, rheumatologist, and sometimes an infectious disease doctor. Some have endured painful biopsies of their mouths that usually reveal nothing conclusive. There are no diagnostic tests. The problem is that there is no diagnostic test for burning mouse syndrome. Aside from reporting pain, patients appear to be healthy. There are no tumors to be seen on X-rays or scans, no abnormal blood work that shows up in the lab. There is nothing that is visible to the doctor or patient. It's not in your head. After another long night of insomnia due to her increasingly painful mouth, Kate began an internet search desperately trying to find answers for the unrelenting pain. Yeah, this was the same thing I did. You just get up and hunt for information on the internet. That's where you get the answers. Doctors don't know what to do about this. This is when she came across a blog post I had written on burning mouse syndrome. Finally, Kate began to feel hope, and as if someone understood what she was experiencing. She emailed me and shared her symptoms. I informed her that I would need to do an evaluation, but it sounds like she might indeed have burning mouse syndrome. She immediately scheduled an appointment. Lots of doctors, but no relief. Kate sat in my office and provided an overview of the various medical professionals she had already seen. She first went to her primary care physician, who was stumped and suggested to see her dentist. The dentist did a thorough examination of her mouth and found nothing abnormal, but sent Kate home with a variety of mouth rinses and pastes that only increased the pain and worsened her dry mouth. Yeah, I think probably alcohol might trigger it, because if it's mast cell related, alcohol is one of the things that you will avoid when you have also histamine intolerance, because it will release histamine, and if histamine is released, it can cause acidity in the stomach. That's my theory, and then it moves up to the mouth or something like that. So alcohol is the last thing you would ingest. She was then referred to an ear, nose and throat specialist who performed a variety of tests and ordered her a tongue and mouth biopsy. Ouch. The result was inconclusive. There was absolutely no explanation for the pain. This is when her ENT suggested she see a psychiatrist for possible stress and anxiety. I mean, I think it's definitely the stress component there. Mast cells react to stress, so I think it might worsen the pain, if that's even possible. But when a doctor tells you it's in your head, that's seriously so invalidating.